Welcome back. One of the things we'd like to do is go back to the hatchery a little bit. And like I said, there's really, to me, 2 points. One is the process. Is the process for the city going to be equal, consistent? As someone who's invested lots of money in downtown, you want to know you're working with people that there's a consistent process that's equal to all, whether it's a CMPA site or now Bruce Beach. That came up at Maritime Park when we said, why don't you do an RFP for Bruce Beach? And that was like 8 years ago, and now we're back because that wasn't done to Bruce Beach. So that's one topic, the fairness of the process, best and brightest use, no property taxes, because the why we heard no property tax, so the hatchery isn't either. But that's one point. But the other one is just like you said, I'd like you to dig into perception reality. Because when I first hear the word fish hatchery, sort of it excites me. I'm thinking these fish, I'm seeing them swimming, I'm seeing them going into the water, I'm seeing people come and fish. And so, I'm not sure because it's my own perception when I first heard it. So what is that gap that you've talked about?
Well, and that's the perception that most everybody has. I mean, how can you not breed fish and release them and there end up being more fish? Of course there's going to be more fish, and that's part of what's perpetuated and strung it along for so many years. But again, you run up against the forces of nature, and I think anybody who has kept a fish bowl, let's say a little goldfish bowl at home, gets this. And that's, that little bowl maybe holds 2 fish. You can dump 5 more fish in there, and they may live a day, they may live 2 days, but eventually they're going to perish, and you're back to the original 2 fish. Mm-hmm. The environment has a limit, and it can only support so many fish, and that's part of what they found is when only in recent years have they actually gone back. They would release fish for all these years, but they never went back and counted to see how many would survive. Mm-hmm. But as soon as you release fish into the environment, the mortality rates are tremendous. They get eaten, they're competing with the wild fish that are already there, they die of starvation, disease. I mean, they're all competing out there. So you end up with few of those fish that you released end up surviving. And so now they're going back and counting, and indeed, they're not finding that many of those hatchery fish. And then the ultimate question that bedevils the whole thing that they really can't figure out is that, again, the environment determines how many fish there can be, not how many fish you dump in there. And the environment will bring that number back down again to what it can support. So you've got hatchery fish being released on top of wild fish, and in the end, some of the wild fish may just push aside some of the hatchery fish may push aside the wild fish. And in the end, you don't end up with any more fish at all. They call it replacement. You literally replace the wild fish with the hatchery fish. That's the one the scientists still can't figure out for sure if it's working or not because of that. And
again, it comes back to, if there is a good idea for a fish hatchery, is there a better location? Just like the Y ended up moving to PNJ and Old Site, and now is Bruce Beach, is that the best use for something to attract residential, attract investment to the East UA? And I guess that's what good conversation leads to, good thought leadership.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Talk some about the health of the Pensacola Bay watershed, because some of the water quality testing that's done, particularly by the health department and reported to the EPA, does show improvement because it was so awful to begin with. Yeah, there is some improvement, but there are some different issues related to how the fish will survive that you have pointed out.
Yeah, certainly our bays have improved. When they really bottomed out in the early 70s, and when the Clean Water Act kicked in, they've improved some since then. But the real critical thing for fish and the real critical overall indicator of the health of our waterways is the presence of seagrass. This is the submerged grass that grows attached to the bottom. Right. You see it in shallow water. It's not the stuff that sticks up above the water. And the only place you really see it anymore around here is along Gulf Breeze and close to the Pensacola Pass. 90 to 95% of it is gone from our bays, what was there historically. That's prime fish habitat. An acre of that seagrass supports 50 or up to 50,000 fish, or 500 million invertebrates, all the little shrimp and crabs and everything else in there. And anybody who's been out on a boat knows that. You get into a grass bed and you see fish everywhere. You get in a sandy area, you hardly ever see much of anything. And so that's the critical habitat that is missing from our bays. It's also a larger overall indicator of the health of our bays. And even though our water has improved some, without that seagrass, it's really not a healthy bay. And our bays here are some of the worst, most degraded in the entire state of Florida, unfortunately. And most people don't know that.
And there has been some discussion that at the Enhancement Center they will do some research and growing of seagrasses. Is that something that gives you some more confidence in the process?
Yeah, I know. I haven't heard. I'm not sure about the actual seagrasses. I know they've talked about from the beginning transplanting and digging up some marsh plants that are going to be in that wetland treatment area. And I think that's a very small amount, and that's really not the plants that are missing here. We need those seagrasses. If indeed they're going to grow seagrasses, the submerged grasses here, then that would certainly be a plus that would add to the hatchery.
Okay.
Christian, we thank you, not only for today, but your URAC study, the Restore Committee, and I know having been downtown, what you bring to the downtown and pushing for walkability bikes, I mean, you're a renaissance man, and we're lucky to have you here in Pensacola.
Well, we're lucky to have you, but I thank you very much for that. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much.